would actually become two Storage Wars stars, the ones we cheered for, joked with, and witnessed win big or lose badly. Some well-known faces have disappeared from the television over time, leaving viewers to question whether a tragic event occurred. Did they only avoid the limelight, or were there repercussions behind the scenes? The fact is equally shocking as the rumors, but it's not as dire. Barry Weiss was more than just a Storage Wars cast member. The show was centered around him. Viewers knew they were watching someone exceptional from the moment he drove up to his first auction in one of his classic cars, sporting those trademark gloves and grinning mischievously. Barry was never the most aggressive contender or the loudest bidder. Rather, he brought something that the program was in dire need of: unadulterated, sincere happiness. Barry viewed each storage locker as a treasure trove, ready to unlock its mysteries, while the other cast members concentrated on profit margins and business tactics. When he opened a unit, he saw more than just dollar signs. He saw adventure, history, and stories. Instead of figuring out the jukebox's market worth, he would spend more time discussing the music it used to play. His eyes would light up like a child on Christmas morning when he found vintage trinkets. Barry realized that sometimes what you could sell wasn't the true treasure. At times, it was the thrill of discovering something new. He took a refreshingly new approach to the show. Long before storage battles, Barry had already made a fortune in the food industry. For him, the purpose of the auctions was to have fun, not to survive. This flexibility enabled him to bid on units that appeared worthless, take chances that others would not dare, and pass up certain things simply because they didn't pique his interest. This aspect of him appealed to viewers, since it brought back memories of the excitement of discovery that initially drew them to the show. Even the most ordinary discoveries were made fascinating by Barry's charisma. He could make a dusty piece of furniture into a lesson about craftsmanship from decades ago. Or he might turn a box of old books into an engaging conversation about forgotten authors. He also knew more than the bare minimum. Barry had a true understanding of rarities, antiques, and their histories. He treated each discovery with the respect it merited, showing reverence for the objects he uncovered. However, Barry secretly left the show after just 4 seasons. There was no dramatic departure or contentious dispute with the producers. He just made the decision to end that phase of his life. Similar to someone finishing a beloved book and carefully putting it back on the shelf. Although unhappy, the majority of fans understood Barry had never come across as someone in need of attention. He was merely a person who liked to tell others about his exploits. Following his departure from Storage Wars, Barry maintained a quiet profile for years. He went back to his other interests, searching antiques, collecting vintage automobiles, and partaking in excursions that didn't include media crews or cameras. With the same kind grin and contagious energy that made him famous, he would occasionally appear in interviews or guest appearances. Before things changed in 2019, Barry Weiss's life appeared to be going well. Barry got engaged in a terrible collision while he was riding his favorite motorcycle through the streets of Los Angeles. He suffered several shattered bones, extensive internal damage, and severe injuries to his legs and chest as a result of the catastrophic accident. All of a sudden, the man who had always exuded confidence and could enter any storage unit was battling for his life in a hospital bed. The recuperation process took a long time and was challenging. Barry had to endure months of therapy. In addition to multiple surgeries, basic actions had to be relearned by the same hands that had previously studied old artifacts with great care. His legs, which carried him through innumerable auctions, needed to learn how to walk painlessly. The imposed quiet must have been quite difficult for someone who had led such an adventurous and energetic life. However, Barry persevered because of his spirit, which is what made Storage Wars fans adore him, like he used to do with storage lockers. He approached his recuperation with interest and patience. He approached mending as an adventure, taking each day as it came rather than hurrying through it or being upset when things didn't go as planned. Fans were ecstatic to see Barry when he finally started appearing in public once more. His smile, it was still warm, his humor intact. However, his pace was different in some way. He spoke a bit more seriously and moved a bit more gently. Although the event had altered him, his soul remained unbroken. If Storage Wars were a poker table, Dave, Hester would be the one to slap his chips down with a smile, only to make the other players tremble. He was the man you loved to despise from the first episode. Dave thrived on competition and was loud, self-assured, and never scared to outbid someone by a single dollar. The other bidders found his notorious UP to be both a source of frustration and his signature. He desired the final word, the finest locker, and the biggest profit. However, Dave's story took a dramatic change in 2018. He had a stroke late one night, which left him with speech and coordination issues. He was laying in a hospital bed, facing weeks of rehabilitation rather than in front of a storage unit. It was a moment of humility for a man who thrived on dominance. For a spell, Dave was absent from the show. The man who used to battle valiantly over dusty crates now faced a new challenge, his own health. He gradually regained his vigor and went back to the world of auctions. Fans were aware of the shift, even if Storage Wars was no longer his primary platform. He appeared more at ease, less engaged in never-ending conflict, and more intent on having fun. People respected the man who battled his way back from a potentially fatal situation, even if they didn't enjoy his antics. It demonstrated that sometimes the loudest voice must become silent before it can be heard again. Ivy Calvin, instead of just walking into Storage Wars, Ivy Calvin strode in as if he owned the place. Ivy, a mixed martial artist and former arena football player, exuded a confidence that caused others to move aside as he entered. He was known as the King of Palmdale because he could quickly identify an expensive locker. For Ivy, managing a tight ship was more important than simply generating money in the storage game. Every item had a place in Grandma's attic, his resale shop, where he took pride. He was the type of purchaser who could find a hidden treasure beneath a stack of dirty blankets and still find time to crack jokes with his rivals. Over time, however, supporters became aware of something. He was becoming less visible. His competitive edge and loud chuckle were still there, although they were less frequent. Ivy was concentrating on his health and spending more time with his family away from the cameras. In subsequent appearances, his sons frequently accompanied him, transforming the auctions from stressful contests into family get-togethers. Ivy demonstrated that sometimes the greatest triumphs take place behind closed doors by stepping aside without a fuss. Daryl Sheets was the crazy elder cousin if Barry Weiss was the cool uncle, who wouldn't risk everything for the chance to win. Daryl lived true to his moniker as the gambler, ever aiming for the big score. If he believed a locker may conceal something amazing, he had no problem throwing a lot of money at it. Alongside him, his son Brandon frequently showed up, learning how to take measured chances, and sometimes learning why he shouldn't. This was more than just business for Daryl. He wanted to leave his son with a legacy he could be proud of. However, everything changed in the beginning of 2019. Daryl experienced an abrupt discomfort in his chest after a typical day. He initially chose to ignore it, but it worsened until he was having a severe heart attack. It was a life-or-death situation, not merely a health issue. The adrenaline-loving man needed to slow down, not voluntarily, but out of necessity. There was an obvious void in the show because of his absence. His tremendous victories, his bigger setbacks, and his fearless demeanor were all missed by the fans. Jared Schultz and Brandy Passante. Because they were so fun to watch, they were like the couple next door who somehow managed to get invited to every party. Viewers could see they were complete opposites from the first episode. Jared's, let's just wing it, exuberance and Brandy's calm, level-headed style. She would use laser focus to scan a storage locker while standing there, attempting to determine whether the stack of boxes was worth the risk. The excitement of placing a bid would be enough to make him want to do so. They were amusing because of that push and pull. As Jared pursued anything dubious, you could almost feel Brandy rolling her eyes, and when she was proven correct, you could see Jared smile. They were able to balance one another. He added excitement. She was cautious. They made choices together that occasionally turned out well, and other times not so well. They occasionally operated their own thrift store on the television, making money off of their finds. However, beneath the giggling and arguing, things were evolving. Their relationship was having difficulties away from the cameras. By 2020, the information was surreptitiously leaked. They were no longer together. There was no public verbal sparring or dramatic on-screen meltdown. It simply occurred. Brandy later alluded to how difficult the relationship had been. She withheld certain information. However, it was evident from what little she revealed that it had been difficult and unpleasant. Following the breakup, Brandy turned her attention from the rigorous filming schedule to her kids. Jared, on the other hand, lost his prominence. The show felt strange without their back-and-forth banter. Fans missed them as a team as much as individuals. They served as evidence that treasure hunts aren't just about finding antiques and trinkets, even though a relationship doesn't continue forever. There are instances when its true worth lies in the chemistry between two people. Renee and Casey Anzota. Renee and Casey introduced a completely different energy to Storage Wars. He had a keen eye for valuables, and Renee's loud voice could cut through any crowd. In contrast, Casey counterbalanced him with a kind disposition and meticulous attention to detail. They clearly worked well together in both their personal and professional lives, and you could see they weren't just pretending to be partners. The world of resale was nothing new to Renee. He had spent years searching for treasures and making money from them, having grown up surrounded by it. Casey wasn't merely a passenger. From identifying high-quality products to handling the business side of things, she possessed unique skills. As a team, they were formidable. They also had no problem having a little fun. Although their interactions on film were light-hearted, it was always obvious that they valued one another's intuition. They all joined together to celebrate their tremendous win. They ignored it and went on when a locker proved to be a bore. However, life has a way of changing priorities. After a brief fight with lung cancer, Renee's father died in 2023. When Renee talked about it, his admirers could hear the emotion in his voice. It was a tough period. He conveyed his sincere appreciation for the help he got from friends and viewers. The couple's journey seemed to take on a new dimension after the setback, one that was less about pursuing the next great success and more about creating something enduring. Along with Laura Dotson, without Dan Dotson's pulsating chant, and his wife Laura's radiant grin, Storage Wars wouldn't feel the same to many fans. They were there to keep the auctions going, not to place bids, and they did it in style. Long before the show, Dan had been auctioneering. Even a pile of old crates could seem thrilling, thanks to his lightning-fast delivery. Laura was by his side, maintaining a positive vibe and a welcoming environment. No matter how heated the bidding became, they worked together to keep the pace going. However, their world was on the verge of disintegrating in 2014. Dan woke up one morning with a strange feeling. His eyesight became fuzzy, and he passed out in a matter of minutes. Laura didn't think twice. She took him right away to the hospital. Physicians quickly identified a brain aneurysm as the culprit. It was a dire scenario. Dan might not have made it through without emergency surgery. The recovery was even more difficult than the operation itself. He recovered his strength over the course of several months, with Laura's help at every turn. When he eventually made his way back to the auction block, fans were relieved, even though his pace was a bit slower than usual. For them, the scare was a turning point. Although they were aware of how fast things may change, they still had a deep affection for the world of auctions. They seemed to laugh a little louder and grin a little warmer after learning that one bidder stood out from the others, Mary Patillon. Mary seemed to approach each auction as if it were a little adventure, while many competitors approached the storage lockers with a sharp calculator. In their heads, figuring out resale value and profit margins. A dusty box was more than simply a dusty box to her. It could be a lost chapter in history, or a potential gem that is just waiting for a new beginning. Her inventiveness immediately distinguished her when she made her debut on the Texas spin-off, Storage Wars, Texas. Mary was a former journalist and design, having served as Architectural Digest's editor's assistant. She developed an eye for distinctive objects and the creativity to envision what they may become as a result of that experience. She was frequently seen on the show searching into lockers, removing items that most people would pass by, such as an old trunk or a worn-out chair, and immediately imagining ways to fix them into something lovely. She had a cheerful, eccentric, and affectionate style. Others occasionally quarreled over bids, but Mary took a more cordial and cooperative stance. She forged close bonds with other cast members, occasionally joining forces to attack a locker. Her excitement was infectious, and viewers liked seeing her get truly enthused about a treasure, no matter how small. Mary carried that same charm. With her, when she switched from the Texas version to the original Storage Wars, which was set in California, she didn't merely acquire and sell. Instead, she reused, rethought, and created unique objects that combined functionality and creativity. Because of her talent for transforming what was considered trash into gems, fans dubbed her the Junkster. However, Mary started to show up less and less over time. In order to market her refurbished goods to clients who appreciated her passion for imaginative upcycling, she turned her attention to managing her internet business. In addition, she began traveling, taking on more personal projects, and looking for fresh chances apart from the demanding filming schedule. Fans continue to connect with Mary's spirit, even though she is no longer a regular on the show. She demonstrated that Storage Wars could be about passion, creativity, and discovering beauty in the most unlikely places, in addition to being about making money. Emily Wares, despite joining Storage Wars later than others, Emily Wares had impressive credentials. She began her career as an auctioneer in Iowa at the age of 17, and by the time she made an appearance in season 10, she had already won numerous awards. She received training from her father, who worked in the auction industry as well, and soon gained recognition for her confident stage presence and lightning-fast chant. She introduced something fresh to the show. She didn't place a bid. She was present to conduct the auctions with professionalism and accuracy. Emily had a clean, well-groomed look, and even the more seasoned cast members were amazed by her speed. On the mic, she broke norms in a business that is frequently dominated by older men. By being one of the youngest professional auctioneers to ever appear on the show at the age of 27, Emily stood out in the sector because, aside from storage fights, she had participated in and won other auctioneering competitions. She maintained a lively pace throughout the program, but she also didn't hesitate to joke around with the bidders, frequently responding to their humor with a swift response of her own. Her skill and charisma were well received by fans, and she gained popularity fast. Although Emily's tenure on Storage Wars was brief, just 1 or 2 seasons, there was no controversy around her departure. She made the decision to concentrate on her personal life instead. In addition to starting a family and marrying her longtime husband, she also pursued her passion of singing. She started sharing her songs online and performed at local events, demonstrating that her skills went well beyond the auction block. Even at a packed auction, Kenny Crossley was the kind of guy you couldn't help but notice. Even a disappointing locker might become a humorous time, thanks to his easygoing charisma, thick southern drawl, and quick wit. In addition to purchasing storage spaces, Kenny was there to enjoy himself, meet new people, and take in the scenery. Before joining the Storage Wars group, Kenny, who is originally from New Orleans, had a colorful past. He seemed to have a wealth of stories to tell because he had worked in police enforcement, had his own company, and even tried his hand at a few odd jobs. His connection with Barry Weiss, one of the most quirky and adored stars of the show, led him into the world of storage auctions. First showed up with Barry, accompanying him on his crazy shopping excursions. His real, down-to-earth nature and sense of humor won over fans right away. Kenny remained on the show after Barry left, making a name for himself among the regulars. He bid in a nonchalant manner. He was not the type to argue passionately over a locker. Rather, he chose his locations, occasionally targeting smaller troops that others might have missed. He has a talent for identifying odd, eccentric objects, which goes well with his light-hearted disposition. Kenny gained recognition over the seasons for his ability to lighten the mood and his memorable one-liners, even when there is fierce bidding. Whether they were other cast members or spectators at home, he had a way of making everyone laugh. Kenny eventually started to show up less frequently. It had nothing to do with drama or animosity. He just shifted his focus to other endeavors, such as opening a donut store and creating his own apparel line. But his absence was hardly unheard of. Online, fans often ask him where he is and if he would return.